I love sharing the stories of people who have seen or interacted with those of the fairy realm. But one of my favourite things to do is feature the true experiences from viewers of the channel. And what constantly amazes me is just how varied these experiences can be. So I hope you're comfy, sit back and relax, because I have 5 incredible stories for you today from viewers of this channel. The first story comes from a viewer who shared an earlier experience with us, which was called the Meadow Fairies. I'll put a link to that video up on the screen now if you'd like to go back and watch it. It's truly incredible. You might recall it actually. She was a range rider and she encountered benevolent fairies in the forest. Now these fairies helped her save the life of an injured man. It's an incredible story, but this was not her only encounter with fairies, and here she shares 2 more experiences she had in that same forest. I was working in the same place as my previous encounter, range riding in the deep forest. One ordinary day I was working in a different place and came across this long wooden table in a wooded area. This table was fully set with plates, knives, forks and spoons, and serving dishes with hot food in them. There was food on the plates too, and drink in the tall glasses. But there were no chairs and no people. I got my cell phone out to take a photo because I thought no one is going to believe this. It was just so unusual, but I couldn't get my phone to work. And my inReach had gone back to sending my location every 4 hours instead of every 10 minutes. It had never done this in that area before. My Irish friend, who knows a lot about the fairies, warned me of 2 things. She said, don't ever eat their food and to always carry a piece of iron in my pocket. And this I did, a little horseshoe nail. So with that in the back of my mind, I rode around this long table and looked for tracks. There were none, not one. So I got the heck out of there. A few days later, I was near that same area in my day camp by the river. I was just sitting down and having my lunch when a man appeared out of the forest and walked over to me. Now, it was hunting season at the time, so seeing a person is not really unusual. I couldn't help noticing that this man was tall and really handsome with long, dark hair. Something made me think of the couple of fairies that I'd met previously, so I got out the nail that I kept in my pocket and I held it in my fist. He came right up to me and asked me about where a particular location was. So I told him what he needed to know and I pointed out directions for him. Then I decided to test my horseshoe nail. I was thinking, what would he do if he were one of the good people? So I held it up to him and I asked him, what do you think about this? He smiled and said, why, it's a little nail. Yes, but what do you think about it? I walked closer and I handed it to him, thinking if he is one of the good people, he won't dare handle it. Well, his smile deepened and he took it from my hand. And then, this is what he said with laughter in his eyes. They make these out of alloy now. Then he turned and walked away. I had a banshee encounter 6 years ago. My Grammy Pat and Papa Joe were not my real grandparents, but they were the godparents of my children. We had moved into Pat and Joe's house because we'd lost our house to a flood and they happened to be moving. Well, one thing I loved to do when we were staying at Pat and Joe's place was to sit on the porch early in the morning, especially in the fall, and drink my coffee with my dog, Tala. This particular morning, it was almost dawn and the lights were soft and pink, and Tala and I began to hear someone walking through the woods. Then we heard the sound of a woman wailing and moaning like she was in terrible pain. This sound was coming closer towards us through the woods. Tala freaked out. She started whining and pacing, and then she headed over to the door, frantically scratching at it to get back in. So I quietly walked over and let her in, but I stayed outside myself because I thought it was a vixen moving through the woods and that I might get to see it. I stood and waited silently, and when it finally came into view, I saw it wasn't a vixen at all. It was white and humanish. I freaked out because the word banshee flashed through my mind. I ran into the house in a panic and my husband and son thought I'd lost my mind. My husband tried to reassure me the noise was just a vixen, but I knew better. I had seen it. Pat was killed in a head-on car accident 3 days later. My father-in-law was a full-blood Cherokee and born in a log cabin where the Blue Ridge Parkway runs now. Every year he would get his Christmas money by walking through the mountains and collecting ginseng. At 80 years old, he could still outwalk most young people who he occasionally took with him. One day he was out and had walked miles and miles through the mountains, but was not able to find any ginseng. Now, he was a man who rarely got angry, and he never cursed at life. He walked to places that he'd found ginseng in the past, but there was nothing. He was amazed and dumbfounded because he always found ginseng. After many hours of walking, he decided it was time to take a break, and he sat down on a rock to rest and eat the lunch that my mother-in-law had fixed for him. Then he did what he always did. He tore off part of his sandwich and set it down, along with a piece of his raisin cake, and then he poured a bit of his drink out. He thanked the little people of the forest and offered them that little bit of food that he'd set down. When he finished his lunch, he lay back and drifted off into a nap. But he didn't sleep long. When he woke up, he looked around to get his bearings and discovered he was surrounded on every side with ginseng. He had never in all his life seen so much of it in one place. He gathered all of the ginseng that he needed for Christmas, thanked the little people, and headed home. When I was in the Cub Scouts, we went on this outing in the woods in a state park. We were all sitting around a campfire toasting marshmallows, and I remember I sensed that there were eyes in the woods watching us, which is kind of to be expected, but it still felt really weird. I started to feel really uneasy as the fire was dying down before someone began relighting it. The smoke was really getting in my eyes then, but it had an almost hypnotic effect. I remember I turned to my left and I clearly saw a little man standing high on a big grey rock at the head of our circle. He wore a shirt that looked furry, like it could have been an animal skin, I guess, and he was holding a tall wooden stick like a walking stick, but it was way too long for him. He was looking directly at us, at the group seated in a circle around the fire, and he was laughing and dancing around on this rock. He seemed so pleased with himself because he thought that no one could see him, but I saw him, and I felt that he knew it because after about a minute, he disappeared. I was with a friend and we were on one of the mountains in the Rockies, way beyond cell service range. We were in a grove of ancient cedar trees and we were sitting beneath a massive cedar tree beside the stream, and we asked the fairies to join us. Then we sat for quite a while actually, just talking and laughing, when suddenly we heard this lovely ethereal music, very jovial and celebratory. It seemed and sounded as though it was as close as the other side of the stream, but we couldn't see any entities. It was the loveliest, most wonderful music I have ever heard. I'd like to send my warmest thanks to Sean, Rachel, Michael, Alice and Carolyn for sharing their own experiences. And if you have a personal experience you'd like to see featured on the channel, just send it along to my email address, which is in the notes below. If you like my videos, why not become part of our community by joining as a member? Members receive special treats, early access to videos, and have their name included in every video. So just click on the join button to get started. And until I see you again, stay curious and be kind. Cheerio!